Welcome to Death on Clare Island, Chapter 4, Part A. I didn't sleep much the nights after Matthew's body was found. Tossing and turning, I couldn't stop thinking about wakes and funerals and other mortal endings. The night after Bridget's visit was much the same. It just brought different thoughts about the police's speedy conclusions concerning Matthew's death. Finally, unable to take it any longer, I threw back the covers and leapt out of bed. Poised almost 500 feet above the cold Atlantic Ocean in one of the two original lighthouse keepers' cottages, I lingered over my morning tea, watching the gannets swirling and diving for their breakfast. I remembered my mother saying she'd lived on Clare Island for a summer with the O'Malley family, so I booked one of the lighthouse cottages for a weekend, hoping to find someone who remembered her. However, just about everyone on the island is an O'Malley. Even with spending more time on the island because of the investigation regarding Matthew's death, I hadn't gathered any more information than when I arrived. I finished breakfast and packed without hearing any stirrings from my neighbor who lived in the adjacent cottage. Trying not to wake him with the sound of my feet crunching on the gravel-covered courtyard, I then tiptoed through the garden and straight to the compound's gate. I was anxious to get back to Castle Bar to check voicemail, email, and see Aunt Georgina. The day promised a sky unfettered by clouds. As I picked my way down the steep and grassy track from the lighthouse toward the harbor, I saw the ferry, Ocean Star, working its way to shore. To my left, Ackle Island and Clew Bay shimmered in the sun. The sheep, with whom I shared the path, ignored me as always. Ever present, they dotted the landscape while also reminding me of the lunch conversation I'd shared the day before with the manicured Peter Hughes. "Excuse me, I hate to intrude, but I hear your American accent," he said, introducing himself. I'd answered the knock on the door with the expectation of another visitor sent by Aunt Georgina. Instead, the man whom I'd seen coming and going from the adjacent cottage stood on my doorstep. "You know, on the beach the other day," he said. "That horrible business with the artist? Well, I was in the crowd and heard you speak. That's when I realized we were kindred Americans." He stopped and extended his hand. "I'm Peter Hughes, owner of the cottage next door." Overcoming my initial surprise, I introduced myself, and for a few minutes we talked about the glorious weather on an island where the tourist brochures made a point to welcome visitors always to bring rain gear. "Would you have lunch with me?" he then asked cheerfully. "I've made a few sandwiches and we can have them out on the patio if you like. It's not often anyone stays in this cottage, and never a fellow American." For someone living on a remote island where the residents fished and raised sheep, his polished fingernails, tailored slacks, and jacket certainly set him apart. So out of curiosity, I accepted his invitation. Besides, it would keep me from fidgeting and reaching for my lime green cell phone case and the mobile phone every few seconds to check for satellite reception. Over homemade brown bread, slathered with butter, plus lettuce, tomato, cheese, and ham, he described his business. Ex-Navy and former real estate agent dealing in antique furniture that people in the United States and Europe commissioned him to find. "Why Ireland?" I asked. I couldn't stop myself. I was sizing him up. I imagined him living in a place like San Diego, in a multi-million-dollar house, instead of atop a mountain on a dot of an island in the Atlantic Ocean. "Grandparents. My grandfather was Irish. When I visited here a few years ago to explore my roots, I discovered a booming economy, and through him, I found I could claim Irish citizenship. A European Union passport makes traveling easy. His ebony eyes pivoted toward the vast Atlantic as he told me his story. Don't you feel isolated? I asked, dusting sandwich crumbs off my hands. How do you stay in touch with your clients and friends in the States? Don't judge the book by its cover, he laughed, twisting the silver link bracelet on his right wrist. My cottage has all the equipment I need to publish my monthly antique furniture newsletter, The Lighthouse Link, electronically. Besides, he grinned as he refilled my water glass and pointed to the sheep dotting the landscape. Is there anywhere on earth more beautiful than this? The scenery is captivating, I said. We agreed to keep in touch, although I didn't believe I'd initiate the contact. I hadn't made my mind up about Peter. The Ralph Lauren wardrobe, for example, struck me as somewhat vain, but then being ex-Navy, he'd have been trained to be careful about how he dresses and carries himself, even as a civilian. The Ocean Star's captain waved me on board as soon as I arrived at the harbor. As the only passenger, I chose a seat near the front, close to the cockpit. The ferry carries its passengers from the island to Runa Key on the mainland. From there, it'll be about a 45-minute car ride east to Castle Bar. As we glided across the water, the morning air caressed my face. Closing my eyes, I imagined for the millionth time what my mother would look like now. What changes had fate and time made to her face? Would it match my memory of her as well as the worn and crinkled snapshot taken in the arcade at Coney Island? Uncertain, I extracted the photo from my wallet. I fingered its border and gazed at her smiling face, framed with short, wavy, thick black hair. Her dark eyes had crinkle lines around the edges, as if she'd spent her life laughing and didn't have a care in the world. I wondered, of course, if she was still alive, and if she would remember the story she'd once told me about why she named me Star. You know where your name came from, don't you? She'd asked me, tousling my hair. I knew the answer by heart. Yes, I'd nod in agreement. I'm named after a star. That's right, little one. A very special star from Ackle. In my searching, I learned about the Star of Ackle, a white crystal found on Ackle Island. Local legend says that when people left their home, they climbed to the top of Slievemore Mountain on the eve of their departure and cried. When they descended, they selected a piece of crystal to take for luck. I imagine my mother chose my name because she believed I would bring her luck. You look familiar. The captain's voice broke into my thoughts. Do you live on the island? No, I'm a visitor. Ah, you may only be a visitor, lass, but you look quite like a native, he said, scratching his head as if he didn't believe me. Why is that? Do I remind you of someone whom you knew on the island? No, not anyone I can recall knowing at the moment. It's just that you look Irish, that's all. My name's Charles O'Malley, by the way. Star O'Brien. Nice to meet you, Captain. Not another O'Malley, I thought. Isn't it strange? Like some kind of twisted humor, fate had given my mother a common surname. Why couldn't it have been something unique like Gun Shannon or Crea? How about joining me here in the cockpit, he asked. Since you're my only passenger, I'll give you a tour of the ship's navigation instruments. As I rose from my seat, he picked up some magazines with the title Subsea and moved them into a storage locker. Patting the seat where the magazines had been, he said, I've made some room for you. While the ferry moved across the water, he explained how easy it is to determine the location of rocks and shoals. Circular shapes, numbers, and compass indicators moved across the surface of the cockpit's dashboard, depicting the topography that the boat traversed on its way to the mainland. He caressed the instruments in a familiar manner, smiling and whistling, checking charts and scanning the horizon. He portrayed a man happily intrigued with his gadgets and even happier to show them off. After a few minutes, he got busy with the business of piloting the ferry safely into the dock, and I went back to my thoughts. Had Matthew owned a boat? I wondered. Anyone who contemplated moving drugs on and off the island needed one, as well as a working knowledge of the surrounding waters. Of course, there might be other ways to transport them, such as the ferry itself. That runs twice a day in the summer. The island's helipad was used to transport the residents during medical and weather emergencies. But I suspected that if Matthew really had been involved in a drug operation, it wasn't through an easily watched location like a landing strip. And why else would he have been seen going in and out of the cove so often? As the captain brought the ferry closer to Runa Key, I could see the ticket stubs, candy wrappers, and aluminum cans that littered the stone pier. The young boy who manned the ticket office bustled about the dock, preparing it for our arrival. After the captain guided the ferry into its berth, they hitched the boat to its moorings within minutes. In no time, I spotted my second-hand green Renault 21 touring sedan in the otherwise sparsely occupied parking lot. Since I hadn't known how long I'd be in Ireland, I decided that ownership was a better bargain than renting. The car had numerous dents, a manual transmission, and no power steering. On the other hand, its turbocharged engine efficiently powered through the dips and twists of the narrow Irish roads. It hadn't taken me long to realize assertiveness as an Irish driving trait. When two drivers faced each other on a narrow byroad, it became a test of wills to see who would pull over first. I'd already driven my car into a ditch several times, which accounted for some of the aforementioned dents. I glimpsed clouds covering the rugged peak of Crowpatrick as I drove the 30-plus miles from Runa to Castlebar through the series of towns and villages, Louisburg, Murrisk, Lacanby, that dot the western coast of Ireland, with Clew Bay on one side and the Connemara Mountains on the other. Also known as the Reek, Crowpatrick is named in honor of St. Patrick. According to tradition, he spent 40 days and nights atop the mountain, praying and fasting. It's also famous for a seam of gold found in the 1980s. I remembered reading a recent news story about a man and woman who were arrested for illegally prospecting. They were caught with picks, shovels, sifting pans, and a metal detector as they drove out of the mountain's car park toward one of Morris beaches. A pencil tip-sized nugget was hidden in a plastic bag tucked into a corner of their trunk. The police made the discovery when they stopped the car for a broken taillight. As I continued on the road through Westport to Castlebar, I couldn't help shaking my head.